I'd like you to welcome Geordie Guy, please.
Thank you very much and good evening. It's always interesting speaking after several other speakers at any event like this, and while I've not had the pleasure before, it's certainly an interesting perspective to speak after Brigadier Wallace. How do you follow that? An Order of Australia medalist, somebody who holds Australia's highest order, who was granted it in 1984. In 1984 I was granted my 4th birthday present. A compelling story, one that I think probably shook all of us of Sam. It's a story that has a lot of things that would set you on the front of your seat, set your teeth firm in your mouth, and it's certainly something you'd do anything you could if you thought there was some way of assisting. I only hope that the way that Sam's story came to light and the way that that bubbled up through, unfortunately on this occasion, the judiciary, through assumedly child psychologists, I hope that there's someone there that can help in a situation like that, and I certainly hope that there's someone who can help in any of those situations like that. I'm not a child psychologist, but I do read an awful lot about child psychology. It's unfortunately a requirement of what I do. It certainly sounds to me like there is call in a story like that for somebody to investigate the likelihood of a behavioural disorder. And while the rest of Jim's conversation with us here tonight talked an awful lot about the damage that pornography does to society, with many different examples from many people who I need to look up when I get back home this evening, I can't help but wonder if this is a situation where, in that we know that babies grow hair and they grow teeth. They don't grow teeth because they grew hair. Two aspects to a situation, no matter how scary they are and how frightening they are, can't necessarily be held to be a situation where one caused the other. I won't stand here in front of you and assert my child psychology qualifications because I don't have any. But looking at a situation like that, I want something to be done, and I want somebody to objectively look at it and not immediately spin around and demonise the internet as we've seen. Jim said a lot of things I disagree with, and it would be difficult and silly of me to sit here tonight and countermand each one of them. I have a specific period of time, and besides, he's an Order of Australia medalist. I don't want to stand up here and say that he's wrong, because that makes me look mean. I watch a TV show called Mad Men. Maybe some of you have seen it. You need to import it from overseas in order to watch it. Don't worry, it's rated M. This show chronicles a New York ad agency in the early 1960s, and in an episode I saw last week, one of the main characters was lamenting the death of his father recently. He spoke how he argued with him constantly, and his mother, in a perhaps misguided attempt to make him feel better, told him that it was worse than that the arguments were arguments of fact. The arguments were only ever things that someone could go away, have a look at the truth, and determine the issue. There were never arguments of belief or opinion or consensus. He cites one particular argument arguing over a breed of dog. The censorship policy in Australia is built upon the Broadcasting Services Act, as Fiona points out, the Australian Communications and Media Authority's blacklist, all of it, and several other instruments of legislation. If you want the truth about what the proposal is, look at the Department of Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy's website, look at the ACMA's website, and read the Broadcasting Services Act. This is an argument of fact. I was shocked in after 2007 election, early in 2008, when I first read about the government's proposal, and it fired me up as part of my FA work in a way that I hadn't previously been fired up. The proposal to me is a proposal which articulates a problem and then articulates a mitigation for it. In my mind, it's akin to the government proposing to build a 400-storey chocolate fountain to repel invaders. It's absurd, I know. Let me finish. We have no evidence of an invading army in Australia at the moment. Were we to have evidence of an invading army, I would question the utility of a giant chocolate fountain in repelling the attack. Anytime I hear a situation where a threat is articulated and something is proposed to mitigate that threat, I want to be sure of two things before my tax dollars go towards it. The first is that there is a threat, and that it is the type of threat that is being articulated to me. And the second, once I'm convinced of that, is that the proposed policy plan to deal with that threat is effective. My analogy works from a bunch of perspectives. We might have some people who are proponents of a giant chocolate fountain, perhaps they sell chocolate, talking about how it may well be possible that one or two people can slip up on the chocolate on their way onto our beaches, injure themselves and no longer participate in the attack. We've seen censorship hardware and software vendors in the technology industry saying that if it only, and some child protection advocates saying that if only one or two children are protected, surely it's worth it. To my mind, yes, we want to protect children. Jim articulates myself and my AFA colleagues as extreme libertarians. I'm certain he was expecting me to show up here tonight in track pants with a neck beard. But we have as much concern about children as any other Australian, because we were children. I was a child when when Jim Wallace was awarded his Order of Australia Medalist. I don't have children of my own, but I have young family members, some as young as 11. While I've been in my beautiful relationship with my wife, she's had a young sister who was, when I first met her, 5 years of age, Sam's age. I want to protect people as well. I want to protect children as well. What I can't handle is the idea that we have an overblown concept of what the threat is. That needs to be rationalised. We need to sit down with experts around the country, preferably child protection experts, child psychologists, articulate the threat clearly, and then once we've measured the threat, come up with a sensible, rational way of dealing with it. Jim points out that EFA hide under a technical guise. I'm certain if that was the case, I'd be invisible unless it was very good light. I have 10 years' experience working with technology. I'm a computer systems architect, as I was introduced, and I know an awful lot about it. I'd be so bold as to say I perhaps know more than Jim about it. He certainly possibly has a more expansive knowledge of the technology of weaponry than I do. The technical measures that the government is proposing to mitigate this threat, let's assume for a moment that the threat is the way that they articulate it. I know this not to be the case, and I've directed you to resources where you can look at why. If anybody wants to question about it afterwards, I suppose that's open. The technology won't work because this is not the way in which the rock spiders that peddle this type of filth peddle their type of filth. The Internet Watch Foundation in the UK maintains running estimates of how many child pornography websites there are on the internet. The reason they're running estimates is because the people that spread this type of material are running. A typical child pornography website exists for approximately 60 days according to police reports. Those particular websites in number at any given time are somewhere between 100 and 2,000 websites, significantly less than the adult industry's managed to tag on their own. Because this material is not on the World Wide Web and it works in a black market, the same way as offline we don't see machine guns and syringes sold on street corner vendors, they're sold on the black market. We're never going to be able to attack this issue with a mainstream approach like censoring the web. I'm not going to wax lyrical about the risks of slowing down the web. I'm not going to talk about the instability it potentially introduces. I don't think these are particularly important issues when we are talking like we are tonight about protecting children. So what would I like to see? Jim accuses us and several other groups of throwing the issue to parents and saying, there you go, parent. Obviously this doesn't work. While I don't know the details of Sam's situation anywhere as closely as Mr. Wallace does, I can't help but imagine that there was a breakdown of parenting somewhere in that situation. That may have been a parent not doing their job. It may have been a parent who couldn't do their job. I don't know yet how difficult parenting is, but I was told by my mother that it was very difficult indeed.